Evening, Mayor Danielle Wong.
Good
So,
evening.
how are you? Okay, so we're excited and we're going to start because we have a lot of people coming in, but we want to be on time. So I want to introduce this lovely person who's to my left. That may be to your right, but it's to my left here. And she is a Bloomfield, Connecticut native. She was elected to office as our mayor in 2019. Now, she brings over 15 years of project management, human resources, and process improvement experience in various industries, including nonprofit, healthcare, and data protection. That's her background. But she's also a political analyst for a popular Sunday morning news show called Capitol Report on Channel 8 WTNH. More personally, our mayor is a doting mom of two active daughters. She has a passion for community enrichment and economic growth and business development in our town. She is a social justice and environmental champion who believes that the greatest impact one can make begins locally. Now, I want to give you a climate change fun fact about Danielle. She's also one of our dedicated tree keepers, keeping and helping us with our Trees for Bloomfield program to plant over 80 trees this last year in areas where the tree canopy was thin. This year, we're on track to plant over 100 trees and give them away in similar areas again. And we are happy to say that Mayor Wong is returning to help us. I want to thank you, Mayor, for participating tonight. I'm going to turn over the program from here to you so you can introduce our very special and informative guest speaker.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and good evening, everyone on the line. Just a reminder that we will be recording this session, and the town of Bloomfield via Matthew Mace will be sending a link to the recording to the email address that you registered with. So you'll have that handy in the next 24 hours. So thank you again for joining. There will be about a 50-minute presentation, and followed by that 50-minute presentation, we'll have a Q&A session for and with our guest of honor. So stay tuned. And as you met Sharon Mann, she is our co-sponsor for the Trees for Bloomfield organization here in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And Mr. Matthew Mace is also representing the town of Bloomfield and will be supporting tonight's event as technical support. So thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Matt. We are so very happy to welcome all of you here to hear what David Pogue has to say about preparing for climate change. David is a host of 20 Nova Science specials on PBS, a 6-time Emmy Award-winning correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning, and 5-time TED Talk speaker, and a New York Times best-selling author. And we are lucky to have him as a Connecticut resident. He welcomes your emails at www.davidpogue.com. Again, that email is www.davidpogue.com. Our webinar today is based on a 600-page book David published on January 26, 2021, How to Prepare for Climate Change, a practical guide to surviving the chaos. And just so you stay tuned, we have 25 signed books by David that will be given away in a special drawing for those attending our webinar this evening. You will be notified by email if you are a winner. And with that, I would love to welcome to the stage our guest of honor, Mr. David Pogue.
Hey, it works. Thank you. Yeah, they thought it would be cute if I remained off screen to have the big reveal. Thank you, Danielle. I'd vote for you. That was a great introduction. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. I have to say, I have given talks on the subject of climate change all through the pandemic and after over Zoom, all over the country and out of the country. And I can quite confidently say I have never seen one as well organized, as been treated as such a king, been so together as Bloomfield, Connecticut. I'm not putting you on. I mean, The population is what did you say, 2,000 people?
No,
22,000
Oh,
people.
22,000. Oh, there was a glitch. Okay. I was going to say, so 105 people. So that means that if this were the city of New York, that means that 47,000 people would have shown up here. So you guys clearly care and appreciate your showing up. Shall I just dive in? All right. So I'm going to share my screen and begin playback. And if anybody can't see this, too bad, because I can't see you. Anyway, so I'm David, and this is Wilbur, the miracle cat. Wilbur is 23 years old, and he has a number of quirky aspects. He is a polydactyl cat, meaning he has 6 toes on each foot, and he also cannot abide there being a direct gap between the camera and me. So he always has to insert himself between the camera and me. Nothing I can do about it. You'll have to tolerate him. So this is the book, as you've heard. It's a 600-page book. It is, well, we'll get to what it covers in a minute, but Sharon was very insistent that I should try to keep this talk under 11 hours. So I'm just going to give you the highlights here. I'm going to give you the talk version of this. Oh, and yeah, that's my job. I'm a correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning. So this book came about when I heard this quote from John Holdren. He was Obama's science advisor. And he said, when it comes to climate change, we have 3 choices: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. Mitigation, that's trying to stop climate change. You know, fly less, eat less red meat, switch to LED bulbs, all very important. We need to do that as fast and hard as we can. Adaptation, the second thing he mentioned, that's coping with what we've got. That means trying to survive our finances, our family, our homes in the face of what's coming. And suffering. We're going to do some of each. The question is what the mix is going to be. So I thought that was pretty profound. And what I also thought was super odd is that all anybody talks about is the first part, mitigation. I mean, yes, we all need to mitigate, but what about adaptation? If you look in a bookstore or Amazon, there are hundreds of books about mitigation, how to stop pumping out more carbon gases. But as far as I know, there's only a single book on adaptation, and that's mine. So that's what you're getting yourself into. This talk is divided into 2 parts. The first part will be depressing, and the second part will be, I want to say, shakily reassuring. I'm sorry about this terrible graphic here. I had to do that in Photoshop. I did try to go to Google and look up depressing and shakily reassuring masks. I don't know if you've ever done a Google for which there are no results at all. That's what it looks like. That's what I got. Anyway, just a quick recap. I assume you know about the greenhouse effect. That's where the sun's rays heat the surface of the earth. The excess heat bounces off in the form of radiation and gets trapped by a blanket of gases like carbon dioxide and methane. That is good. That's a normal thing. That is a positive thing. That's what keeps the earth from being a frozen ice ball where nobody could live. We're very glad we have that blanket. The problem is that the blanket's getting thicker. And the thicker it is, the more those rays of radiation bounce off the blanket and come back to heat the planet again. I am not a fan of the term greenhouse effect. I think most Americans don't understand that a greenhouse is 20 degrees warmer inside than outside for this very reason. I think if we want to reach people, we call it the dog in the car effect. Because if you think about it, it's exactly the same thing. The sun's rays come in, heat the upholstery, the radiation tries to get out, it's trapped, it heats up inside. We're the dog. Cover your ears, Wilbur. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have always fluctuated. That is totally normal. As you can see, about every 100,000 years, there's a big spike. But what concerns people is what you see at the right end here. The carbon dioxide levels have never spiked this high, this fast. These measurements are made in parts per million, which is, you're going to hear me carp a lot on how bad scientists are at communicating to the public. Parts per million? What does that mean? All it means is molecules per million molecules in the air are now carbon dioxide, 415, 420. That's how many of the molecules are now carbon dioxide. And that is double what it should be. If you expand that spike, if you stretch it out horizontally over the last 200 years, you'll see something really interesting. This spike began in the late 1880s, which is exactly when the Industrial Revolution was happening, when we started burning coal and oil to provide our power and our machinery. That's when this spike started going up. And furthermore, if you graph the temperature of the planet against this rise in carbon dioxide level, you'll see it's a very good match. This is what makes scientists think that there is perhaps a correlation between increasing carbon dioxide levels and the temperature of the planet. So we are currently pumping out 162 million tons of carbon dioxide a day. And if you ever wonder how it breaks down, this is how it breaks down. It's the largest ones are transportation and generating power, industry, cows. Don't get me started on cows. The worst for the environment. If you want to do one thing to lower the emissions of the planet, eat less red meat. One cow belches up 5 to 10 gallons of methane per hour. Per hour. One cow. Methane is like carbon dioxide, but 80 times worse at trapping heat. So really, really bad. Furthermore, 1/3 of the landmass of the entire planet that's not frozen is dedicated to cattle grazing. That's why they're burning the rainforest in Brazil, to make more room for cattle to graze. It is the worst. Anyway, so I'm also not a fan of the term global warming, because that makes people think, oh, it's just the winter's getting milder and the summers are a little hotter and who cares about that? Actually, it's a lot crazier than that. This does not look like global warming to me. I don't know if you remember Texas, this devastating blizzard in 2021 killed 164 people, 10 million people without power. I don't think you understand. In southern Texas, they don't have salt trucks. They don't have winter coats. They don't own them. So it was a total disaster for everybody. And it's because global warming is not always warming. It is freak heat waves and freak cold snaps. It is flooding and water shortages. It's droughts and intense rains. It's domino effects. It's chaos. Nature is a system and everything is interrelated. So when you move one lever, you can't help but move a bunch of other levers at the same time. These are some of the secondary effects of this hottening and coldening. Wildfires, hurricanes, you've read about all this stuff. Infectious insects are expanding, losing crops, and human migration is going to become an increasing problem as certain parts of the world become literally unlivable. People are going to have to move. And then there's these third level effects that strike people as really weird, but they're all part of the same system. So I don't know if you've heard of Tornado Alley. It's the strip of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, where most of the world's tornadoes occur. That region is shifting eastward. And the reason we care about that is that Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma are wide open spaces. They're fields. They don't kill as many people, tornadoes, because there aren't a lot of homes and buildings. It's the breadbasket, it's the fields. But as they move eastward, they're moving into poorer areas, Missouri, Mississippi and Tennessee and Alabama, where the housing is not built especially sturdy. So we have more people dying from tornadoes. Smaller beaches, more expensive chocolate, more kidney stones, smaller goats. And here's the one that gets them here in Connecticut, lower PSAT scores. Yeah, that gets people's attention. All domino effects of the crazy chaos. These are better terms than global warming, climate chaos, climate breakdown, global weirding. I like that one. These are all better terms, I think, than global warming. We are seeing some spectacular broken records. As you may have read, the last 10 years have been the hottest years ever recorded on the planet. And not just the hottest years, we have also seen last year and the year before, the hottest single temperature ever measured on the planet. It was in Death Valley, California, 2 years in a row, 131 degrees. That is hot. That's like egg cooking hot. You might have heard that in 2021, the Northwest, including Canada, experienced this unbelievable heat wave. I mean, 121 degrees in Canada? What is happening? And it was the hottest heat wave ever in recorded history. There were these wildfires in 2020, burned 5 million acres in California. That's the entire area of these 3 states, Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island. This was San Francisco. My wife took this picture. This is noon. That's what it looked like at noon. It was from smoke from the wildfires drifting over the city and blotting out the daylight. Crazy. And then the next year, there were further nightmarish wildfires. Overall, you can see that there is a trend in how many wildfires and how many areas are being burned by wildfires. I did a story on this for CBS Sunday Morning, and I interviewed a guy from Cal Fire, that's California's fire department. And I said, this is the end of 2020. And I said, you must be so glad that this season is over because this is brutal. And he goes, what are you talking about? This is the baseline. This is the floor from which it's only going to go up. This gives us a glimpse of what's coming. So he was not thrilled at all. And just because we live here on the East Coast doesn't mean like, oh, well, they have wildfires, we don't care, because the smoke plume floated across the entire country. I don't know if you remember this, but this is what it looked like in New York when the California wildfires were going. I mean, it was hazy smoke from the entire continent. And it's not just the US. Australia had those unbelievable wildfires that created smoke plumes all the way around the planet. And this one blows my mind. They are getting heat waves and wildfires in Siberia, the frozen tundra. This is supposed to be the ice capades here of the planet. I mean, 118 degrees in Siberia? What? Nuts. It's just nuts. 2020, we set a new record for the most hurricanes. As you probably know, we name our hurricanes after boys and girls' names alphabetically. In 2020, they ran out of alphabet. So they had to start using Greek letters to complete the naming for that season. This you probably remember from elementary school. This is the water cycle. So water from the ocean evaporates, goes up into the air, condenses in clouds, rains down as precipitation and rain. That flows down the rivers and creeks back into the ocean, and the cycle repeats. Well, this is where the bad news happens in this cycle right now, because 93% of that trapped heat from that blanket of gases is going into the oceans, not the land. The oceans take a long time to heat up or cool down, centuries or lifetimes at least. So people say to me all the time, well, what if we all stop burning coal and oil right now? Would things cool down? Yeah, it will, but not in our lifetime. You will never see the 1980s weather. I mean, that is done. Here is proof. This is the Gulf of Mexico. The gray stuff is the land. Hurricane Ida came through and hit Louisiana, did devastating damage because that water was 7 degrees warmer than it usually is. And what that means is, remember the water cycle? That meant more evaporation. That meant more water in the atmosphere and therefore more rain. And it devastated New Orleans again. If you look at the overall rains in the last 100 years, you can see what's happening. It is steadily growing, heavier extreme rains. In Miami, guys, I don't know who thinks it's a good idea to move to Florida to retire. Miami got 11 inches of rain in 3 days last year. And this is Tennessee in 2021, 17 inches of rain in 24 hours. 17 inches, that's like, and And it's all over the world. I mean, every country is getting these freak floods, these freak rains. You may have remembered when the dams burst in Midland, Michigan, and flooded out entire cities. Nebraska, at one point, 2/3 of Nebraska's counties had a disaster area declaration. And Nebraska is where we get our fruits and vegetables from. They had 20 million unplantable acres. So if the price of your fruits and vegetables and bread go up, you can say it's the climate crisis, because now you know the chain. There's very little humor in in the climate change circles, but there is some, and this is one of the best. This is a tourist attraction in Kentucky. It's the Noah's Ark replica. I kid you not. This tourist attraction had to file for an insurance reimbursement of $1 million for flood damage. It just doesn't get more ironic than that. Hurricane Katrina. The hurricanes, they're not sure if they're becoming more of them necessarily, but the ones there are certainly getting more powerful, and that we've definitely seen. Katrina, this is Hurricane Sandy, the biggest hurricane ever recorded in human history, 1,000 miles across, $70 billion worth of damage. This is what New York City looked like. I'm sure you had your own experience here in Westport. We lost power for 6 days. I mean, that means, we lost everything in our refrigerator and freezer, no internet, no TV, no lights, no heat. And, I had 3 little kids. And, for the first hour, it's fun, let's light candles and play board games like they did in the old days, and then hour 2 comes along and you're like, how am I going to get through this? So anyway, the problem is that these are no longer freak occurrences. So statistically, we used to get a hurricane the size of Sandy once every 500 years. By 2017, that statistic was once every 25 years. And by the end of this decade, we can look forward to something like that about once every 5 years. One big part of this problem is if you look at where climate change hits first and worst, they are the poorest counties, always and always. So these are the top 10 most vulnerable counties in America, and 81% of the population are people of color. There's a long list of reasons why. These communities tend to be in poorer areas, which tend to be closer to the water, where it's low level land and the floods come in. The houses tend to be built more flimsily. There's a long history of redlining. Look that up if you don't know. Anyway, it's just over and over we see this, and that's why I think it's important that the Inflation Reduction Act, we'll talk a little bit about that, bakes in equity and fairness at every level of these things. These are some of those reasons I was mentioning. Oh, yeah, the heat island effect. That's where in urban areas, city areas, the heat bakes the asphalt and radiates it back up. And there isn't enough greenery to cool down the air. This is London viewed from above. That's a temperature map. You can see that downtown London is 10 degrees hotter than the outskirts of London because of the heat island effect. Also, poorer areas tend to have less air conditioning. In southern LA, 60% of homes do not even have air conditioning. Fewer people have cars, so it's harder to get to cooling stations or to evacuate. Anyway, so if you add all this up, all these disasters, this is the big, big picture. We're getting more disasters. And pretty soon, sooner or later, that's going to hit everybody, no matter where you live. Used to be, we'd get a $1 billion natural disaster in the United States once every 82 days, about every 3 months. Now, we get a $1 billion weather disaster once every 3 weeks, about every 18 days. So something is going on. Yale has this climate change communication group, nonprofit, and they do a survey a couple times a year of what Americans think, what their attitude is toward the climate crisis. And every year they ask, is all of this human caused? A lot of people ask me, what do you do about climate deniers? And, that's a tricky term. I actually believe that there aren't any climate deniers, vanishingly small numbers of people who say nothing is going on, nothing has changed. This is the same weather we've had since the 80s. There aren't very many people who can say that with a straight face. There are still people who say, yes, things are changing, but this is part of a natural cycle. So in the most recent poll, is climate breakdown human cause? The Yale group found 58% say yes, 29% say no, that it's a natural cycle. And you might say, well, that's still a big number, but the number is dropping 5% every year. And if you think 29% is a big number, let me remind you that 20% of us believe that aliens walk among us. So 29%, we're doing okay. So for our purposes, it doesn't matter whether you think the climate crisis is man-made or natural, because what this topic, what this talk and this book are about is how to protect yourself, is how to get ready for what's coming, whatever is causing it. I don't care if you think it's a Chinese hoax. It's happening, it's real, you know it. So these are the ways that you can protect yourself. This is what the book looks like. These are what the chapters are. It's where to live, how to build, what to grow, where to invest, how to insure, how to talk to your kids. And then there are individual chapters on flood, heat waves, drought, tornadoes, wildfires, and so on. And then the last chapter, as I mentioned, is where to find hope. And so I was just going to give you some of the highlights today, so as not to make your eyes glaze over. The first chapter of the book is actually called Acclimating to Climate Change. I wrote the book during the Trump administration when the United States government, no joke, had removed the term climate change from all federal websites and pulled out of the Paris Accord that we had previously agreed to join. It was a very depressing time. A lot of people had anxiety. And that is really why I decided to write the book. It was a self-soothing exercise. I wanted to dive in and see if there's anything I can do. It turns out that depression is not just feeling like your situation is bad. It's feeling like your situation is bad and you are helpless to change it. That's depression. So it follows then that if you want to overcome your environmental depression, taking some kind of action so you feel like you have some kind of control is the key. And we're talking about 3 different kinds of eco-anxiety. There's post-traumatic stress, which is the kind of depression you get after a disaster. 5 years after Hurricane Katrina, there were still extraordinary numbers of suicides and depression. There's pre-traumatic stress. That's worrying about what's going to happen. Ask your kids about that one. And then there's something I hadn't heard of before called solastalgia. This is longing for a place that you haven't left yet because it's so different. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but the fall foliage is no longer as vivid and colorful on the East Coast as it used to be because of climate change. The sugars are coming and going faster. They don't have enough time to change colors. So people miss it. People miss sledding and skiing in the winter, so it's solastalgia. So yeah, so the antidote is action. One of my experts said the most effective way of dealing with climate despair is to do something. So that could be trying to lower your carbon footprint. That could be therapy or group therapy. It could be stress relief exercises. By the way, I'm not an expert in any of those topics that I showed you in the table of contents. This entire book was a reporting job. It was a big, go ask the experts and synthesize what they say project. So one of the eco-therapists I interviewed says she uses this really cool tactic, and it's been used in the military to great effect. It's called the worry hour. And so here's how it works. You say to yourself, at 4 o'clock every day, I'm allowed to wallow, or whatever time you pick. At 4 o'clock, I'm going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to go over my woes. I'm going to remark on how crappy everything is. But if any of those thoughts occur to me in the other 23 hours, it has to be postponed till tomorrow's worry hour. And it really works. I mean, it's just a psychological fake out, but it genuinely works. You feel better because you say, all right, I'll worry about it tomorrow at the appointed time. You can start a campaign, you can embrace advocacy, but doing something makes you feel better. In fact, this book has been called, because it's so action-oriented, it's been called the first uplifting book on climate change. It was called that by my editor, but I mean, I think she's totally unbiased. I think she knows what she's talking about. Anyway, so chapter 2, this is the one everybody asks about. It's where to live. Obviously, it's very expensive and big hassle to move, and not everyone has that luxury, but 40 million Americans do move every year for various reasons, starting or ending a job, starting or ending a marriage, starting or ending school. So more and more, you will have the opportunity to consider multiple options about where you're going to live. There is no place in the United States that's totally unaffected by the changing climate. But in general, if you have a choice, here's the breakdown. You want to be north far enough to avoid the heat waves that are brutalizing the South. You want to be west far enough to avoid the hurricanes and the sea level rise. Hurricanes, as you may have noticed, only hit the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. The sea level rise thing is a real problem for us in Connecticut. This is where I live. This is a website called Surging Seas. It's really cool, sort of terrifying, but cool. You can put in any address, and then it will show you what the rising sea level will look like. People say, oh, a foot of sea level rise, who cares? That's a foot. It's not the vertical height we care about, you guys. For every 1 foot the water goes up, it flows inland 300 feet. So that's rolling into our basements and our businesses and so on. So you drag the slider on the left to the number of feet you want to estimate, and then you watch the water roll in over your coastline. It's really terrifying. You can try this with Boston. Here's Boston by the end of the century. Boston's low-lying and flat. I mean, their coasts are toast. The coasts are toast. Although it's nothing next to Miami. I mentioned Miami. Miami is not only at sea level, but the ground is porous. You can't build a seawall around Miami. The water's coming up from under you. So here's what they're saying in the next 50 years. And not just for Miami. If you zoom out, this is the entire southern tip of Florida. Absolutely unbelievable. In Miami, they're getting this thing now called sunny day flooding. This is where you're getting flooding in the streets when it hasn't rained. It's the craziest thing. They have storm drains in the streets of Miami. The problem is the water is coming up out of those storm drains instead of into them. I don't know what to say about this picture. I guess the guy is like feeding the meter for a submarine. Anyway, I would not be buying real estate in Miami. So you also want to move east far enough to avoid the water shortages and the wildfires. Nobody talks enough about water shortages, you guys. I know it's not very telegenic for the evening news to see live video of a brown field. Hurricanes get all the love from the cameras, but where do we get our water from? There are 3 sources. Number 1, out west, we get it from snowpack. This is the snow and ice that accumulates during the winter and then melts during the spring and flows down the rivers into our reservoirs. So by 2050, all the snow-dominant regions in the West are going to be gone. By 2080, they're expecting no snowpack at all. You can already see it in the satellite photos. This is California. Look at the Sierra Nevada mountains there. In 2010, there's a decent amount of snowpack. 2 years ago, look at the same area, taken at the same time of year. Compare, for example, this area where there used to be snow, there's now barely any. Look at this area, no snow at all. So the snowpack, we can't count on that for drinking water anymore. We also get our water from reservoirs, from dams. Every single US reservoir is now at historic low. That there you're looking at, that's the Hoover Dam. And that is Lake Mead built up behind it, a man-made lake that gives 25 million people their drinking water in 3 states. It is down to about a quarter full. It's dropped 160 feet in 20 years. If it drops another 10 feet, there will be no more hydropower from this dam, and another 10 feet beyond that, and there won't be drinking water anymore from this dam. The third source is aquifers. These are these big underground, sort of gravelly, sandy areas where water collects. We pump it up. And at this point, 21 of the 37 biggest aquifers in the country have passed the tipping point, meaning that we are draining them faster than nature can refill them. So that means they will eventually become completely empty. So we got to think about water, you guys. This is a map of the drought last year. It's brutal. It's everywhere. I couldn't believe the New York Times 2 days ago had the headline where the government had to settle a fight between states over the water from the Colorado River, like who's going to get how much water. They're literally at each other's throats. This drought is not likely to end anytime soon. It is the worst drought in the West in 1,200 years. I love it. It is the worst drought since the time of Charlemagne, as one of these articles put it. So where can you meet all these criteria about where to live? This is the answer. Above the 42nd parallel in the Great Lakes region. All these great old Rust Belt cities, the Duluths and Chicagos and Clevelands and Pittsburghs, they used to be working towns, blue collar towns. Now they're being marketed as climate havens because look at the water. You got the Great Lakes right there. Unlimited fresh water with no sea level rise, no hurricanes. You don't have the heat waves of the South. You don't have wildfires. It is literally the sweet spot. In the book, I went through 15 sample cities and chose them not just because they were climate havens, but because you would want to live there. This is Cleveland, where I grew up. They have great art museums, symphony, zoo, sports teams, hospitals. Hospitals, that's important to think about when you're thinking about growing old in the climate era. You're going to get sick more than you used to. There's an airport 15 minutes from the downtown, a lot of city parks, and the cost of living is nuts, you guys. $1 in New York will buy you $2.71 worth of stuff. Housing, groceries, car, whatever it is in Cleveland. This is Madison, Wisconsin. 5 Lakes, capital of Wisconsin. There's a zoning law that says you may never build anything taller than the state capitol building. So it'll never be a concrete jungle. It's very beautiful. And as you can see, every website and article declares Madison to be the fittest city, the nicest city, best to raise a family, best for tech jobs, and so on. I did a story about this topic for CBS Sunday Morning and walked the streets with the mayor of Madison. And I said, yeah, but isn't Madison famous for getting really cold in the winter? And she's like, not so much anymore. It's up 7 degrees from 1980, and it's going up 11 more degrees by mid-century. So the winters are less nasty in those cold states. Burlington, Vermont, it feels like a seaside city because it's on Lake Champlain, this 500-mile lake, but it's not saltwater and it doesn't have hurricanes and it doesn't rise. So it's the highest educated population in the United States, the lowest crime rate, and they have really good cheese and ice cream there. And Buffalo, I mean, a dirt cheap place to live, welcoming climate migrants, great medical facilities. Niagara Falls is right there, and the chicken wings are as advertised, really good. Another chapter that I found interesting to write was where to invest. There's a whole discussion with my editor about whether to even include this chapter because, is it a little crass to talk to people about you can make money from this chaos? And the answer is yes, you should talk about this because every time somebody invests in a green company or green technology, even if it's to enrich themselves, you are in effect helping the whole country, the whole planet. So for that reason, it's important to encourage investment in these green investments. And let me tell you, this isn't like investing because you're an altruist. This is investing to make money. Look at the difference between oil stocks at the bottom there and the regular stock market. I mean, if you had invested $1,000 in clean energy stocks, 6 years ago, you'd be up 60%. You'd be up to $1,600. If you'd put the same thing in fossil fuel stocks, you'd be down 12%. So they're literally the place to put your money these days. So where exactly? Well, you might say, well, it's got to be solar power, right? Solar power is the future. Yes, it is the future, mainly because the price of it is crashing. It is so cheap to generate power. And that's inspiring this graph. Look at how much power we are getting from solar in just 20 years. In fact, to me, this is the most unbelievable graph in this whole thing. This is how many power plants we built last year. So 82% of it is solar power and wind power. And that's unbelievable. Clean, free, forever energy, and zero new coal capacity in this country. They are taking coal plants offline. They are shutting them down. Coal is dead in the United States. I'm sorry, coal miners, but there are already 5 times more jobs in the solar industry than there are in the coal industry. 5 times more. This is the other great joke in this talk. There's another tourist attraction called the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum, who, I kid you not, installed solar panels on their own roof to save money. If that doesn't make the point, I don't know. This is another astonishing graph. In 2020, 2021, for the first time, renewable power in this country surpassed coal power. And those lines are only going to cross farther. Coal is gone. And that is because, as I mentioned, solar is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. The scientists predicted we'd be at this price per watt in another 80 years. It happened so fast. And it happened because of China. To them, solar panels, solar equipment is a commodity, and they're pumping them out. It's a rush to the bottom. It's who can make it cheapest. And that is why it's a bad investment, right? You don't want to invest in something whose price is continually crashing. So good for the planet, bad for the investor. Same thing with wind. All the same arguments apply. Wind capacity is shooting up in this country because it's gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And that's why it's a bad investment. In fact, so cheap that in Texas, electricity after 9 o'clock p.m. is now free. They have so much wind, they don't know what to do with it. They want you to use it up, to burn it off. So they give you free nights from the power utilities in Texas. Unbelievable. But that doesn't mean you can't take advantage of these trends. 38 states have renewable energy mandates. So, for example, New York, California, and Hawaii say within 7 years, these states must get 50% of their power from wind and solar. So who will benefit from those laws? Think about it. The utilities who are going to sell that power to these states. So there are these utility companies like NextEra and Xcel, giant outfits that are quickly dumping their coal plants and switching to solar and wind, anticipating 2030 when these mandates are going to kick in. They're the ones who are going to get rich. Think about it. If you're a power company and you generate power from coal and oil, you have to buy the raw materials, coal and oil. You have to refine them, which is costly and dirty. Then you have to comply with government emissions rules by cleaning it after you burn it. All that's expensive. And now you're going to replace the coal and oil with solar and wind. There's no raw material costs. There's no refining or processing, and there's no emissions laws to contend with. And you think they're going to sell it to us any cheaper? Of course not. So their costs are going to go down to nothing, but their income will stay the same. So I predict that's a good recipe for business success. A lot of people also say, well, I wonder if we should invest in electric cars. It is a worthy thought because literally every single car company alive has vowed to switch completely to electric cars, including if you can believe it, General Motors? What? The most calcified, corrupt corporate, General Motors in bed with the petroleum industry, but it's true. They are switching entirely to electric cars. And it's not that these companies are such, altruistic do-gooders. It's because of this. Countries and states all over the world are banning electric cars. They're planning to phase them out, gas-burning cars, and electric will be the only cars you can sell there. And that, of course, means doom for car companies that haven't switched to electric cars. They're making electric cars so they can sell them. It's kind of great news, actually. So if you do want to invest in this trend, think upstream from those different car companies. Think about what components will they all need? And what they will all need is lithium-ion car batteries. And there's only 4 companies in the world that make them. And there they are. They're all Asian companies, and you can invest in all of them. Or the components that they need for the connectors and the capacitors, solenoids, those companies like Aptiv and Valeo. Or you can even think farther upstream than that and think about the lithium itself. Somebody's got to mine that lithium, and they will profit as the industry switches to electric. So you can invest directly in those mining companies. There's also some good sector bets when it comes to investment. I mentioned the water problems all over the world. There are companies, investment companies, that invest in desalination plants and pipelines and purification systems. You can buy into a fund that invests in all of that. If you think about the growing areas on the top right here, those of you who are gardeners know that on the back of every packet of seeds is a little USDA map of growing regions that shows you which zone this packet of seeds will thrive in. Well, as the planet heats up, those zones are shifting northward. If you look at these two maps carefully, you'll see that the USDA has actually had to redraw the zone maps. So if the growing area of the country is shifting north, that means more farms in new places. That means people buying farm equipment who didn't used to have it. And that means new crops, Monsanto and Syngenta. I know they're evil, blah, 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 but they are developing drought-resistant crops, and they will benefit. The insurance question is, my wife jokes that I can dominate a dinner party for an hour and a half talking about the National Flood Insurance Program. It sounds so boring, but it is really super, super interesting, especially when it comes to climate change. They say, 15 minutes is enough to save you 15% or more in your car insurance. No, 15 minutes really is not enough. Look at your declarations page. You probably got your insurance at the cheapest rate you could at the time when you bought your house, but things have changed. For one thing, I think you'll discover something alarming is going on with flooding in this country. Flooding is not only happening more often, but the size of the flooding claims are going through the roof. And this is where your insurance comes into play. Guess what? Turns out your homeowner's insurance does not cover flooding. This comes to a shock as a lot of people, but it is true. It covers theft and fire and hail. It does not cover flooding. So in 1992, Hurricane Andrew hit Florida, and the Allstate and Nationwide, all those companies got slammed with billions of dollars of flood claims to the point where they exited the business. They're like, this is ridiculous. We'll never make money if we have to pay out claims to floods like this. So all the major insurance companies got out of the business of offering flood insurance, and in their place, riding to our rescue was the government. They started out this thing called the National Flood Insurance Program, and they have noticed, by the way, this is an astonishing statistic, that of the top 10 most flooded states in America, 8 of them are not on the coasts. Isn't that crazy? It's because of that drought rain cycle we talked about earlier. So the ground dries out, it gets really hard and non-porous, and then a huge rain comes, and the rain has nowhere to absorb, so it just rolls down the hill and into your basement, and boom, you got flooding. That statistic just totally shocked me. Arkansas was the most flooded state in 2021. Amazing. So now 95% of all flood insurance is provided by the government in the National Flood Insurance Program. The problem here is that it has been, it's not like car insurance where if you have an accident and you file a claim, your rates go up. The government has never raised their rates since they founded this program, even if you are hit multiple times. There's a house in Texas that has filed for flood reimbursement something like 9 times in the last 20 years. The government has paid them $3.5 million to repair that house over and over and over, never raised their rates. And furthermore, the rates themselves are calculated based on current and past flood data. It doesn't take into account what's happening, that the floods are happening more often and getting worse. And there's super coarse area measurements, like the insurance rates are determined by your zip code, not by your backyard's proximity to the water. So they are going to, and as a result, this program is $25 billion in debt because they've had so many claims. So they are planning to revise this. They're just starting to roll it out. It's called Risk Rating 2.0, where rates will be brought into line with your actual risk. But this has been really tough to get through Congress because, look, if you have this kind of flood insurance, one of two things will happen under the new program. Either your rates will go up because they've been artificially low for years and you'll be furious and you'll vote your congressperson out of office, or your rates will go down because it was too coarsely calculated all these years and you'll be furious with your congressperson for overpaying, for making you overpay all these years. So very unpopular politically, but it's got to be done. A lot of people are wondering what will happen to insurance. Like in California, they're getting out of the fire insurance business. They can't make money insuring people for fire. So, I mean, there's only so many ways an insurance company can remain profitable. They can drop customers, they can raise their rates, or they can get out of the state. And they're doing all of those things. It is very likely, according to my experts, that insurance one day will be something only rich people have because the rates will be so high, no ordinary person can afford it. So I mentioned that there are a bunch of chapters on individual disasters that you might be facing. There's also a chapter that applies generally to all kinds of disasters, and that's this one, chapter 8. And I really didn't want this book to be like, here's how rich people can protect themselves. These are generally free things, just thoughtful things you can do. So for example, if I were you, I would download this app right now. It's free, it's from the Red Cross. The saddest part of the climate crisis is when you hear about people who died because they didn't get word to evacuate. They weren't watching the TV, they don't have smartphones, whatever. And so the wildfire or the flood, the hurricane hits them and they die. So the way this app works is you put in your address and you put in the addresses of anybody you care about, your grandparents, your parents, your children, whatever. And then you could put the app in a folder somewhere and forget it. But if there's any of 52 different kinds of disasters approaching one of those addresses, and not just natural disasters, it's also, power plant leak or oil spill, whatever, this thing wakes up and chimes and alerts you. So you have time to alert your loved ones and get them out. I had fun doing this with my kids. You make a go bag or a bug out bag. And the idea here is you want everything in a backpack in the front closet that you would need to survive for a couple days out of the house. So when the authorities say evacuate, you can evacuate. You get going without running around crazy. Like, what should I pack? What do we need? You'll already be ready. And then the add-on tip that I put in the book is there are things that you can't leave packed all the time, like your ID and your meds and your phone charger, whatever. So leave a big note on that backpack listing the 3 or 4 items you're going to have to get in the spur of the moment, and then be able to grab those and head out the door. Let me tell you, in California, I gave this talk and everybody was like, yeah, I know. Everybody already has these. Everyone now has go bags by their front door. And now it's more than California who needs them. I don't know about you, but here in Westport, every time there's one of these mega hurricanes, the bottled water shelves are totally wiped out in the grocery store. You don't need to do that. There is drinkable water already within the walls of your house. So for example, your hot water heater has 40 or 80 gallons of clean, fresh, chlorinated water ready to go. You turn off the heat, you shut off the intake, you put a bucket at the bottom, and you got free, clean water in a crisis. There is water available in your toilets, not the bowl, obviously, unless you're a Labrador. No, I'm talking about the tank. The tank contains 3 gallons, 5 gallons of fresh, clean, drinkable water in a pinch. And if your house has multiple stories, there's also water in the pipes. So you can open the tap at the top, let the air in, and open the tap at the bottom, let the water pour out. The United States is the developed world leader in power failures. We have more power outages than any other developed country, and it's just getting worse. So unfortunately, there is no free way to help yourself out when the power goes out. But generators start as little as $15 for one that will just charge your phone, give you light, and give you an emergency radio. Get that from Amazon. For $250 at Home Depot, you can get an actual generator. It does mean you have to run around getting kerosene or gas when the disaster is approaching to make sure it's fueled up. They're loud and they're smelly, but you can plug your kitchen into it. Your refrigerator won't lose all your food. Plug in a heater and you'll have a few outlets that you can keep hobbling along. If you have more money, they make the same thing in a form called an inverter, which are small and quiet. Or if you got the big bucks, you can get a standby generator. This is one that you don't need to refill the fuel. It's connected to natural gas all the time, and it kicks in automatically when the power goes out, so you barely even notice it. After Sandy, that miserable experience with my kids, we had one installed here, but the tip here is you don't need to spend $10,000, $15,000 to do it. We decided to get a little cheap one that powers only the kitchen and one room, the living room. So we will have heat and we will have food, and we're not paying a ton of money for the generator. When the power goes out, the cell towers go down. This happens in every one of those big disasters. So it's a good idea to sit down with your family and plan, what would we do if the cell service went out and we couldn't communicate? Where would we meet up? So some Saturday dinner, have this conversation. Say, where would we meet in the house? Like if it's a storm and you're supposed to keep away from the windows, how about the basement? How about the library? Whatever. And you want to pick a neighborhood spot. Like, what if they say we're not allowed in the house? And I come home from school and you come home from work. Well, we're going to meet at the mailbox at the corner, or we're going to meet at the public library, whatever. Yeah, and then if they won't even let you onto your street, pick a place in town that you'll know, the Walmart or the library or whatever. So write that down on everybody's notes page in their phone and put it on the refrigerator and in the car dashboard. So when the time comes in 4 years or whatever, you will remember what you agreed and where you agreed to meet. It's a great idea that could save a lot of anxiety. This is a Connecticut special. This one, as the winters are getting milder, the ticks aren't dying off like they used to. So there are some seasons when we have 2 generations of ticks now because the winters are so mild. The number of disease cases from mosquitoes, ticks, and flies is going through the roof. The United States CDC tracks Lyme disease cases, but Lyme disease, as you probably know, it's really annoying. There's no good test for it. You don't even really know if you have it. The symptoms are very variable. It can't even really be diagnosed very easily. There's no good medicine for it. And if you get it the wrong way, you have it for years, just feeling tired, and it's a nasty thing. And keep in mind that because people know that they have it, only 1 in 10 cases they think gets reported. So we think we're getting 30,000 cases a year. 30,000 cases a year are being reported, but the CDC guesses is probably more like 300,000. And we are living right smack in the thick of it. I had a fantastic conversation with this guy, Dr. Tick, at the University of Rhode Island. He is the tick guy in the United States. He knows everything about everything. And he said, people think that like ticks are sitting up in the tree, watching you for you to walk along below them so they can jump down and bite you, and then you get Lyme disease. There are so many misconceptions. So let me give you some reassurance here. First of all, most ticks don't carry disease at all. If you know you have Lyme disease, getting antibiotics early cures it once and for all. You've heard that thing about the bullseye-shaped rash that indicates that you have Lyme disease. You only get that half the time. So if you don't have the bullseye rash, you could still have Lyme disease. As for that myth about the trees, ticks can't fly or jump. They don't even have eyes. What they do is they stand at ground level with their little paws up in the air, their little feet, and wait for something to pass by, and then they grab on. Usually it's deer or little rodents. And if you care, you don't want to get it, put on DEET bug spray. It's very safe. It works great. It doesn't kill anything. It just smells bad to the ticks, so they don't want to jump on you. Also, this is fascinating. Ticks can't survive under 82% humidity. They dry out and die. And you can put this to good use. For example, if you're worried about ticks, getting you in your yard or something, 9 feet of lawn between where you sit and the woods is Death Valley to them. They cannot cross that. Remember, they can't fly or jump. So 9 feet of lawn is like Death Valley. They dry up and die on their way to your patio or your playground's equipment. So they can't cross it. If you have been out for a hike, here's what you do. You come inside, you take off your clothes, throw them in the dryer for 10 minutes. The heat of the dryer and the dryness kills whatever's on your clothes. And while you're standing there naked, you look over your hairy parts for ticks. Because here's another fun thing. You can't get Lyme disease unless the tick has been on you for 36 hours. So you have a day and a half to find and remove that thing before you can get the disease. As we know, the internet is correct about almost everything, but here is one thing that the internet gets wrong. When you find a tick, don't remove it with a match or Vaseline or any of those bogus things. Remove it with a pair of tweezers from the head, yank it out, then it's completely gone from you. And if you care about your fellow person, mail it to Dr. Tick. Go to tickencounter.org, mail it in so they can study your tick, find out what kind it was, if it had Lyme, and what the overall trends are showing. So this is another long conversation. In the worst climate disasters, society breaks down. Katrina was the big example for this. I mean, the stoplights weren't working. The police didn't show up for work at all. In fact, the police were filmed doing the looting. There was no water, no internet, no TV. It was 1830 all over again, just the Wild West. And so some people think, well, maybe I should protect myself. Maybe I should have a gun, whatever. So interestingly, my expert on this was a couple of survivalist guys who have huge gun collections. And they were the ones who said, that's not why you get a gun. You don't get a gun to protect yourself against home invasion because of, these statistics that we've all heard. You're twice as likely to be murdered if there's a gun in your house and so on. Instead, they recommended light. First of all, if you're worried about a home invasion, about, some crazy people trying to storm your house, they don't care about your house. They care about a house, and they're not going to go to the one with all these bright lights on. So these lights cost $10 from Home Depot. They're solar powered, so they don't have to be wired. And no one's going to want to come and hit your house. And if you want more of a personal weapon, the survivalist guys recommended this thing. It's a tactical flashlight. You can buy them off of Amazon or wherever. This is what the police and the military use. They are so bright that when you shine it in someone's face, they are disoriented and they're stopped in their tracks. One guy on Reddit I was reading said, I've had good luck. Just shine it bright directly in their face and say, hey, back the beep up. I've defused quite a few sketchy individuals. So I promised you some hope at the end, and man, there is a lot of it. You are tuning in at the right time. I mean, even before the new president had a favorable Congress, he did all these things working solo. Rejoined the Paris Accord, unveiled a $5 billion plan to build electric car chargers at every few miles on the highway, halted new drilling, tightened car standards, and installed climate scientists at every level of the federal government. A huge deal. And then this happened. What they're calling the Inflation Reduction Act was, in fact, the biggest climate bill ever passed anywhere. Billions and billions of dollars, very thoughtfully split to address that slide at the beginning about what's causing the most emissions, and to do it equitably, like fairness among social classes built into these plans. And the goal is to cut carbon emissions 40% by 2030. I mean, yes, it's too late. Yes, it's not enough. I've heard that. But my God, you guys, it's so much better than what was happening. This is unbelievable, reassuring. This is also sort of hopeful. This country's greenhouse gas emissions have been steadily dropping. It is not because we're all such good citizens and cutting back on our red meat. It is because we've switched largely from coal to natural gas. Natural gas is still not great, but it's way better than burning coal. Trees. I heard something about trees there in Bloomfield. Trees breathe in greenhouse gases and breathe out oxygen. Trees are fantastic. And they also cool the planet. Like respiration of leaves actually drops the temperature in the same way that we get cooler when we sweat. So all over the world, massive, massive programs to plant trees. Very exciting. And as I mentioned, coal is dropping everywhere. You know, everyone always says to me, what about China? Why should we stop our emissions if China is still pumping them out? Well, China's not still pumping them out. China has promised that they're still burning coal themselves because China's ground is filled with coal. It's like cheap, free energy. But two things. First of all, they have said they're going to stop building coal burning plants for other countries, which used to be a big profit center for China. So that's something. And also their president has said, we are going to go for carbon neutrality before 2060. I mean, who knows if they'll follow through, but that's what they've announced. China also by far leads the world in how much solar and wind they've installed, way more than we have. Space pictures from above India show that their greenery is increasing. So people are aware. I mean, yes, we need more, we need faster. Yes, I know, but it's not like nobody's paying attention anymore. Dramatic shifts in where we get our power. I mentioned that before. Even in nuclear, this is absolutely fascinating. Did you know that nuclear power as we know it comes from a uranium isotope called U-235? You've probably heard of U-235. We decided, even though that's a fairly rare isotope, we decided in this country that's what we're going to build our nuclear power plants to use because it can also be weaponized. In the 50s and 60s, we're like, well, hey, we can make nuclear bombs out of the same stuff. That's why we're not using U-238, which is 100 times more prevalent in the Earth's crust, 100 times cheaper. So now Bill Gates, the Department of Energy, and all the big federal labs are working to see if we can use U-238 in our power plants. It cannot melt down, it cannot be weaponized, and it can even use as starting fuel the fuel rods from the existing power plants. There's also another element altogether that can be used for power, thorium. It's not uranium at all. There's 500 times as much of that in the Earth. It also cannot melt down and cannot be weaponized. There's almost no waste. You don't need those big cooling ponds. And 6 countries are working on making this work. Man, if we could get that kind of nuclear power incapable of melting down or weaponizing, that would solve it. More hopeful news. Between 2020 and 2021, sales of electric cars doubled. And then from 21 to 22 went up another 50% and would have gone up much more if it weren't for the chip shortage. You might have heard about that. At this moment, you can't buy a Tesla sooner than, like, they're saying like you can get one in December. It's like they're back ordered. Everybody wants one. So that's a good problem to have. A lot of people complain to me, like, why should I do my tiny bit to eat less red meat and fly less and carpool when the emissions I put out are a minuscule fraction compared to the corporations? And that is absolutely true. If we want to make big strides, we get the big polluters to stop polluting. Well, that's changing too. Over 250 of the biggest corporations in the world have pledged to go to 100% renewable energy. This is a website called the Carbon Disclosure Project, or CDP. You can look up any company here, and in the middle there, you see they get a letter grade for how well they're doing at decarbonizing. Do they get an F? Do they get an A? Whatever. And they also tell you what effect climate change is going to have on their business. And it's fascinating. Like Bayer, the pharmaceutical company I was reading, in their paper, they say, we anticipate a 60% rise in the kinds of illnesses that people need our medicines for. So we're delighted. I mean, it's going to be profit for them. But all of this corporate responsibility, there are 3 different parties hammering on them to stop polluting with greenhouse gases. One is consumers, like we care now. One is investors. Investors do not want to invest in companies with losing greenhouse track records. It's a bad look. And increasingly, the employees themselves. So 2 years ago, Amazon had no carbon project. They had no plans, and the employees rose up and they made a big fuss. And now they're planning to be carbon neutral by 2040. They're replacing all their vans with electric ones. They're spending $10 billion to fund climate science. All the tech companies, Alphabet's the biggest consumer of renewable energy on earth. Apple has been 100% renewable since 2018. Microsoft not only plans to be carbon negative in 7 years, that means taking out more carbon than they're putting into the air, but they say by 2050, they intend to have removed all the carbon from the air than the company has ever pumped out in its history since 1979. Now, there aren't very many good ways to pull carbon dioxide back out of the air. We mentioned trees. That's the obvious one. There are also these plants, factory type plants. I'm doing a story about this for CBS Sunday Morning that are designed to extract carbon dioxide from the air and condense it and pump it deep underground. Very untried technology. Nobody knows if we can get the price cheap enough, but those are underway. So it'll be a challenge, but that's what they've said. So bottom line, there are 2 reasons you might want to think about preparing for climate change. The first one is the obvious one. You will be ready when a disaster comes, protect your family and your home and your health. But there's sort of a stealth reason that I alluded to earlier, and that is that you will sleep better at night. You will feel less depressed knowing you have taken some steps. You've taken control over your bad situation, and that'll make you sleep better at night and feel better. People ask me all the time, if the goal is to decarbonize humanity, it seems like a ridiculously big job. Do you think we'll ever get there? And I think we will. I think it'll take 60 years, 70 years. But when I look at the young people and what they believe and what they care about, my generation is going to die off. And these people are going to be making the decisions. And they are not going to let things keep going the way they are. So that's why I believe that it's underway and it will happen. Until then, I encourage you to prepare. Thanks so much. I'm happy to take any questions you got.
Wow, that was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, David. To your point, I was a little down and depressed at the beginning of the presentation, but then it moved into a place of hope. And Bloomfield is a pioneer. Bloomfield, Connecticut. We are doing the things that we can do as a very diverse community, planting trees and doing things like that. But I will say I may have to take Florida out of my retirement plan, and I may be a part of the percentage of people in this world that believe we are walking among aliens. So very, I loved it. Wow. So we are going to dive into some Q&A. I think, we're ready to go here. And if you asked a question earlier in the beginning of the segment, please drop your question now in the Q&A chat, and I'll go ahead and read the questions from there, and we'll see what David has to say about that. All right. So we have one question from Lily. Are electric cars better than gas? My family has had them, the Teslas that are a custom, back order issues. So what would you like to elaborate on that particular one?
I know exactly where this question is coming from. I get this all the time. I read that after they mine the lithium and manufacture the car, it releases more carbon emissions than a gas car did in the first place. It's not true. It does in fact release more emissions to mine the lithium, make the battery, and construct the electric car than it does to build a gas car. Yes, that is true. But from the moment it's made, the electric car ceases to burn coal and oil. It ceases to put out emissions. Now, it's got to get the electricity from somewhere, and it does, but it gets it from the grid. Think of what we do in our regular cars. We have built a power plant into each individual car. The economies of scale are terrible. You cannot get an efficient power plant when you have to build one into every car. The energy that is made in a power plant, first of all, you can get a lot more power per gallon of oil if it's burning oil. And as you now know, the power plants are all switching to solar and wind and sometimes nuclear. So that means the electricity in your car is coming from the grid, which is increasingly free, clean, and cheap. So the answer to the question, the short answer is by a year and a half, 18 months of driving your car, you will have caught up with the emissions of the gas car and you'll start dropping. So by one and a half years, the difference between them is erased. And for the rest of that car's life, you are putting zero emissions out there. So it drops from there.
Thank you for that answer. And something just in relation to that particular question, Tesla currently cannot sell cars in Connecticut. And so Scott asks, how can this be changed?
Oh, I did a huge article about this. It makes me crazy. All right, you guys, you have to know the truth about why they can't open Tesla dealerships in Connecticut. A Tesla or any electric car has 1/100th the moving parts of a gas car. So the powertrain and engine of a Tesla has 20 moving parts. A gas car has 2,000 moving parts. Therefore, electric cars basically don't need any service. They don't have spark plugs, they don't have filters, they don't have oil changes, they don't have emissions checks. I've had a Tesla Model 3, I got it in 2018. It has been 5 years. It has never seen a dealership for maintenance or service. So as a result, car dealerships hate these freaking things. They make no money from service. Now, they typically make 50% or more of the dealership's profit when they service gas cars. They only make a little profit when they sell you the car. They make a lot more from servicing it. When you buy an electric car, you're taking away all of their profits from service. And believe me, they don't like that idea, and they get to your politicians. This is not a joke. You can Google it. You will see that in Connecticut, for example, one of the elected legislators in this state, his reelection campaign was hosted at the local car dealership, hosted by the dealership. So it is very corrupt. It is a direct line between car dealers and politicians. And that's why every time the legislature meets, I think they meet every other year, every single time they vote to allow electric car dealerships in Connecticut, and every time it's defeated. We're not the only one. There's 20 states where you can't buy a Tesla from a dealership. It's infuriating, and the people will one day rise up. But for now, don't vote for those people.
Thank you, David. Moving right along, Kay lives near a small airport, and they have a plan to expand. This isn't the only one. It's happening across the country. Why? Why are these airports expanding for commercial travel, increasing GHG emissions?
Yeah, I mean, this whole topic, I'm sure everybody here knows, is a constant push and pull between our lifestyle as rich Americans and saving the planet. I mean, you've heard my speech on beef. It's the same thing. The average American eats beef, 3-4 times a week? And it would be much better if they didn't, but you're really going to talk them out of it for GHG reasons. So, it's unfortunate. I mean, air travel is bad, but it's not the worst thing. It's not as bad as the beef industry. It's not as bad as the power industry. It's not as bad as agriculture. Yeah, that upsets me, but not as much as some of these other things. They are working on electric planes, by the way. It's harder to do with big planes. They do have small planes. They have the regional puddle jumpers that can go 400 miles that are all electric. And those I think will be coming along soon. The big airliners could be a lot longer.
Okay, thank you. A couple questions here, kind of related to laws and policy and legislation and food scrap collection / recycling. Is Connecticut going to mandate this, do any states leading in this, in addition to disposal of the batteries? What are the ramifications on doing or not doing some of these things?
I don't know the answer about legislation about food scrap recycling, but you're onto something huge. As you've probably read, 40% of the food produced by the food industry winds up getting thrown away. Now, that's usually made to make us feel guilty and terrible, but that includes food that rots in the grocery store warehouse, food that's spoiled in transit. It doesn't mean that we buy food and then 40% of that goes to waste. We're part of it. We do throw away a lot of food. So there is a lot of talk about, should we tighten up the food chain and not waste so much? It's a huge contributor because agriculture generates massive amounts of greenhouse gases. Eliminate the 40% of waste and you eliminate a lot of greenhouse gases. As for what to do about electric vehicle batteries, the good thing is that nobody really knows how long they last because electric cars are only a few years old. So it used to be the estimate was about 8 to 10 years, the same as a gas car lasts, and then you'd need to do something with those batteries. But there's new research from the UK that says our current electric batteries, car batteries, could last 20, 23 years. And remember, it's like your phone, right? The phone doesn't just stop working one day. The battery over 500, 700 charges begins to hold less. So your electric car will still keep working when the batteries drops to 250 miles of charge instead of 280 miles of charge. But to answer the question, we don't have a great plan for what to do with the used electric car batteries when they're no longer useful in our cars. But there are some really interesting discussions about that. One is maybe they could be used to solve the intermittency problem of solar and wind power. This is always the beef by oil industry people, but you only get electric power when the sun is shining. You only get wind power when the wind is blowing. Well, yeah, that's why we need grid batteries. We need grid storage batteries so that when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, you charge up these big batteries, and then at night or when the wind is not blowing, they feed the power back to us. So that would be one idea. See if you can take all these car batteries, stack them up, daisy chain them, and make grid batteries out of them. The other thing I would just like to remind you is that we didn't always have lithium batteries. Remember, we used to have alkaline batteries. We used to have nickel cadmium. We used to have lead acid. There are all kinds of chemistries that can make batteries. And just because we live in an era of lithium ion doesn't mean that's the end of all. That doesn't mean that's the last kind of battery chemistry there will ever be. I promise you it isn't. Right now, I did a 2-hour special for Nova on this topic, on the search for the next battery chemistry. And some of them in the labs right now have 10 times the power storage capacity of lithium ion. I mean, we're talking driving from here to California on a single car charge. So don't think that lithium ion and our current disposal problems are the end of the line.
Thank you. Jeff asks, should we be encouraging more remote work? This Zoom conference, for example, it might have been held in a hall where everyone is driving their cars to that place.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think enough has been made about this, about the fact that the remote work movement has been fantastic for greenhouse emissions. They are holding conferences. I mean, even big conferences now, you have the option of attending remotely. That's cars and airplane tickets that you didn't take. That's been a huge thing. The other thing that doesn't get nearly enough credit is Google Maps and Waze and Apple Maps. Someone should tally all the thousands of miles that we don't spend lost burning fuel driving around. I think those apps have done a huge service for the environment by getting us directly to our destination without wasting fuel.
Thank you. Cheryl asks, leaving the lights on is harmful for fireflies and other species. That seems to conflict with your recommendation to leave lights on as a deterrent to crime. What's more important, family safety or the survival of a species?
Well, I think that is probably your call, Cheryl. For me, it would be my family. And I'm not sure that, 3 or 4 solar lights shining on the wood of your house, of your one building, is going to do tremendous damage to fireflies. Maybe on a mass scale if everybody in the world did it, but I promise you they won't.
Thank you. I see some hands up, but I just want to reiterate that we're going to have to take the questions from the Q&A box, just because of how our webinar is set up. So I would just ask you to drop your questions there if you're able to. Thank you. We have another question from Bloomfield's own environmental champion, Brenda. She's asking what state is leading in heat pump installations and what can Connecticut do to catch up?
Ooh, oh my gosh, so I didn't know about heat pumps until I wrote the book. And heat pumps, for those who don't know, are how Europe heats and cools their homes. They do not have separate heaters and separate air conditioners like we all do. Instead, it's a unit, you probably see them, it's high up on the wall, and it basically works like a refrigerator. You know how a refrigerator works? It basically takes heat out of the interior of the fridge and pumps it out into your kitchen. That's how it works. It actually pumps heat out. And that is exactly what a heat pump does. It can suck heat out of in the winter, out of the air outside your house. Even if it's very cold out, it can suck whatever heat there is and heat your house with it. And then in the summer, it can go the other direction. It can take whatever heat is inside your house and pump it out to the outside, cooling it in your house, all for a fraction of the power and emissions of air conditioning and heating. So they are catching on. We actually just, my wife and I are downsizing. Our new house is half this size. We're moving to Westchester County, and I was delighted to see the house we bought has heat pumps already installed. It's a 2-year-old house. So it is catching on. So Brenda, what can Connecticut do to catch up? It can incentivize and publicize heat pumps, offer rebates, offer discounts, put legislation up for grabs, and spread the word. They're really cool. I mean, they're really cool.
Great. Omar asks, Wouldn't a very robust public transportation system and a car ban be more appropriate than building millions of more cars, considering the consequences of a 1.5 roughly incoming by 2030 and unforeseen environmental tipping points?
Yes.
Great, easy answer.
No, I'm kidding. I mean, yes, of course, that would, any logical, educated person would agree with that and vote for it. That is not who we're electing, and that's not most Americans. So that's where we're at for that. With that, we have to work within, the political system we've got and the consumer culture that we've got.
Okay, great answer. Julie asks, you're talking about adaptation rather than mitigation, but I would like to hear your views on lawn services, gas mowers, and leaf blowers and watering. I have read that all of these things are far worse than gas guzzling vehicles.
Oh my God, yeah, you're about to launch me on my second biggest rant after beef. Yes, lawns are the worst. Grass is a terrible monoculture. It's like a baby. It needs everything handed to it. It has to be watered, has to have nutrients, has to be mowed. It is an environmental disaster. Nobody thought this through when we decided this is what nice homes had. It is changing. In our new home, we are ripping up the lawn and planting native plants and flowers. So we will have bees and butterflies all summer long, and never hire a landscaper. And yes, you're right. The reason leaf blowers and mowers are worse than cars is because they do not have any of the emissions controls. There's no catalytic converter. There's no, it just burns the gas and then pumps the emissions straight out into the air. And they're noisy as heck, and they're really expensive, and they're a nightmare. Many towns, including this one, are mulling bans on gas-powered leaf blowers and mowers, maybe not so much because of the emissions, but because it's noise and people hate it. Our new town, Bedford, New York, has such a ban. You can only use electric ones. The landscapers hate the electric ones because they're not as powerful. But yes, the lawns are the worst. Consider it. Consider part of your lawn making it a garden. It makes an amazing difference. It cleans the air, it smells good, it saves you money, it looks great. Butterflies are beautiful. You're doing good for the planet, and you don't have to pay for anything. There are even, if you insist on a green, even carpet, there are even plants that look like grass, but they're like micro clovers, in fact. So they don't have they're not as needy as grass. They don't need treatments and water and mowing. They just sit there at a low walkable level, and you never have to mow them, and they grow all by themselves. So you can read about that. No mow grass.
Love that. Thank you. How does population growth affect climate change?
It's not great. Not great for climate change. The more people they are, the more power we need to generate, and inevitably the more livestock we need to graze. The one big problem with China and India is beef used to be called the millionaire's meat. It used to be something that rich people ate, and they have this rising middle class in China and India, and they want beef. So the importing beef from us and from South America is going through the roof. At the same time, China is incredibly polluted. I mean, you cannot see the air in Beijing, and the middle class doesn't like that. So they are starting to put political pressure on the government to become cleaner. So there are two opposing forces going on in these countries. So yeah, population just means more greenhouse gases and less physical land to live on. The UN predicts that as many as 200 million people will need to move by the end of the century because the places where they live now are simply ungrowable, unlivable. So the guy who runs climatecentral.org was one of my experts, and he joked that we will wind up building that wall along the southern border, not because of Mexican laborers, but because of hundreds of thousands of South American human beings who have nowhere to go but north.
Wow. Thank you for that. We're gonna continue to ask us a few more questions, so hang in there. We'll get to them. I see questions coming in. Thank you. Scott asks, Yale just came out with a study that conserving wildlife is incredibly helpful as regards to climate change. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I actually just did a story on something called rewilding. And in brief, there's this couple outside of London with a 35,000 acre farm. And compared to the industrial commercial farming all around them, their soil was bad and they couldn't become profitable and they didn't know what to do. So they finally decided, they read about this idea called rewilding. It's a new idea in land management where you don't manage the land. You give up, you abandon it. You see what nature wants to do with it. And incredibly, in very quick order, a decade, it became one of the most biodiverse spots in all of Europe. We're talking about species that have not been seen in Europe for 600 years are coming back and are breeding. We're talking about plants and animals and insects and these butterflies, these storks that haven't been seen since 600 years ago. And now they make more money than they ever did as a farm through ecotourism, and you can rent camping tents there. And what's cool about the rewilding concept is all of this vegetation is cleaning the water for the farms that are still around them. They're doing a favor for the commercial farms because the water flows through the roots and gets purified, and they're attracting tens of millions of pollinators, bees, butterflies, bats, to this rewilded area that then go over to the real farms and pollinate their crops, and it's cleaning the air. So their fantasy is to have a web of rewilded nature through Europe, and there's big movements in this country too to start rewilding areas for that very reason. I mean, literally everybody comes out ahead, and of course, anytime you've got vegetation, you've got plants purging the air of carbon dioxide. That's what they eat. So that concept is a winner. It just takes political will.
All right. We have a question from another statewide leader in environmental change, Lori Brown. She says, fantastic presentation. And lots of great recommendations, but some seem to be in conflict with each other, such as nighttime lighting, which could relate to lighting pollution, and conflicts where forests are cut down to build solar infrastructure. What do you say about, are these some false choices? How do we get people to pay for the best solutions? It's hard. What will it take to bring the naysayers who only care about immediate costs back to the table?
I sense a thread in a lot of these comments. A lot of you are saying, how do we get people to be smart and reach the utopia we all want, where man and nature live in balance? I mean, we all want that, you know, but I think they all boil down, as you say, to convincing the naysayers. It all boils down, this is a democracy. If we care, we can elect people who will do these things. And that boils down to something I haven't really touched on, but was one of the most enlightening parts I found researching the book, which is, how do you talk to a naysayer? What is the right way to talk to a denier or an oil, lover, or a gas car lover, whatever? And I was fascinated to learn that facts and study after study after study has proven that facts and figures will make it worse. That somebody told me this, which I've repeated so many times: you cannot change somebody's mind with facts and figures of an opinion that wasn't formed with facts and figures in the first place.
Mhm.
So if somebody believes something, if it's religious, if it's family oriented, if it's being American, facts and figures and statistics will never change their mind. It will only make them dig in. So climate change is an emotional issue. At the core, every naysayer is wrestling with an emotional challenge. I mean, we were raised in this country to know that that bigger is better. Consumerism wins. He who dies with the most toys win. Consumerism is our grading scale for ourselves and our success, right? So now you're asking people, actually, we were wrong about that. Live smaller, don't travel as much. I mean, it's a really tough sell. You're hitting people where they live. So how do you convince somebody? Another great saying one of these therapists told me is, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. It's the greatest. It should be on a t-shirt. And what that means is you begin the conversation about climate change with your own emotional issues. My kid can't sleep at night. He's convinced that the world is going to end. I have an uncle who lives in the Midwest and his farms got wiped out and he's got no income for 2023. Bring up emotional issues. That is how you connect with somebody whose emotional opinions aren't the same as yours, and you can work from there. But it does not work when you barge in and start saying, your car puts out 50 gallons of, don't do that. Don't do what I did in this talk by saying cows belch out 5 gallons of methane an hour. I think most of you are probably already on my side.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Another question about vehicles. So a couple of our listeners are a little weary about like the lead brand, like the Teslas of the world. Do you recommend another electric vehicle? And where are we with electric school buses?
I have no idea about the school buses. I know that there are vans, and I know that there are buses. I know there are trucks that are going electric, so it won't be much longer now. But what was the other question about? Oh, if you can't get a Tesla. Honestly, Tesla's technology, especially when it comes to automation and self-driving, is easily 5 years ahead of anybody else. So if you care about the self-driving stuff and the software and the sophistication of the safety features, there's nothing like it. But from a pure miles per charge perspective, I mean, General Motors and Ford and Leaf, the Nissan Leaf is a popular one. They're catching up, and they're certainly better than a gas car. And you guys, today is the day that the new federal rebates kicked in. The government will give you $7,500 back. This is not a tax deduction that you deduct off of your income. This is a tax credit. This is a check to your bank account. And the state of Connecticut will give you $3,000. So that's almost $11,000 that you can subtract off the price of any American-made electric car right off the top. So that is a lot. I mean, that brings an electric car well down to the price of a gas car or even lower. $11,000.
Great. Ooh. Incentivization. I love it. All right. Our last question is from Sana. It looks like she wants to go in detail here a little bit. So Sana just recently read a book called 6 Degrees. And it's talking about tipping points and greenhouse gases and how the polar ice caps are maxing out in the amount of methane that they can take on. Can you elaborate on this problem and explain this more in detail? And how does that relate to what we can do in our daily lives to help?
Well, this sounds a little bit like the polar cap problem. So it turns out that in the permafrost, which is ground that is permanently frozen, which is at the caps of the planet, there are trillions of tons of methane trapped, centuries, thousands of years worth of methane trapped in the ground. And the problem with the world heating up is that the ground is melting and releasing the methane into the air. It's yet another source of methane that we have to worry about. So yeah, really, really bad. And the more methane comes out, the more the planet heats up, the more the permafrost melts, and the more methane comes up. And you're right, there will be a tipping point where that cycle can't be stopped. And that's bad stuff. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? What is the doomsday scenario? I don't believe it'll ever mean no more humanity. I don't think this is the sixth extinction and all that. I mean, things could get really rough. Population of humanity could decline a lot. There's just not going to be food or land to live on if it gets really bad. People will just move north. I mean, Canada is basically empty. Greenland is basically empty. So the world, maybe the world 200 years from now will be humanity hunched into these northern areas so that they can live. But let's hope it doesn't get to that. It does look like politicians are starting to wake up even now, especially because, you know what? Talk about false choices. As the Biden administration has shown, you can have both. You can be, in many ways, a consumerist society and still tackle the problem. Because you know what? In the decarbonization process, trillions of dollars will be changing hands. New companies, new industries sprouting up to take advantage of these policies, to come up with new technologies, new nuclear, new cars, whatever. That's consumerism. That's a democracy. So it is entirely possible that new institutions and companies and people inserting themselves into this stream of trillions of dollars mean that you can be rich and American and still save the planet.
Great. David, thank you so much for this amazing presentation and the time that you have spent with us. I just want to reiterate to our attendees again, thank you for coming and supporting these efforts. I want to thank the town of Bloomfield and my colleagues, as well as the co-sponsors, Sharon Mann and Trees for Bloomfield Initiative, for putting on this amazing event, this thoughtful event, and educating myself and all of our wonderful attendees. So again, Mr. David Pogue, on the behalf of the town of Bloomfield, we are so grateful and we offer gratitude for all of the work that you're doing for generations to come. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is a thrilling event. You guys are the best.
Awesome. Have a wonderful night. Thank you all for attending.
Bye, guys.